The stars died one by one across the galaxy, not from natural causes, but from something far worse. The Xerilith hegemony moved through space like a plague, consuming everything in its path. Where once proud civilizations had built great cities, among the stars, now only empty husks remained. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of Luna Base, watching the latest reports come in. The holographic display showed the galaxy as a map of lights. Red dots marked Xerilith territory. Blue dots showed the free worlds. Each day, more blue lights turned red. "How many this week?" Chen asked her aide, Lieutenant Rodriguez. 7 star systems, Rodriguez replied, his voice flat. "The Athani finally fell yesterday. Their crystal ships lasted 3 days against the Xerilith fleet." Chen nodded grimly. The Athani had been one of the oldest races in the galaxy. Their ships could move faster than light without engines, using some kind of crystal technology that human scientists still didn't understand. If they couldn't survive, what chance did Earth have? "What about the Corvin Collective?" Chen asked. "Gone. Last month. The Xerilith turned their own cybernetic networks against them. Complete system shut down in under 6 hours. The holographic display updated again. Another blue light flickered and turned red. The Braxton Empire, the most warlike race in known space, had just surrendered. Chen felt a chill run down her spine. The Braxtons never surrendered. They were the kind of people who would fight to the last warrior rather than give up. If even they had fallen, the situation was hopeless. "Ma'am," Rodriguez said quietly, "there are only 12 free worlds left in the entire galaxy." Chen looked at the display. 12 tiny blue dots in a sea of red. Earth was one of them. A small, young world that had only learned to travel between stars 50 years ago. Most other races in the galaxy thought of humans as barely civilized children playing with dangerous toys. "How long until they reach us?" Chen asked. "Intelligence estimates 3 months until the first Xerilith scouts enter our solar system. Maybe 4 if we're lucky." Chen walked to the large window that looked out over the lunar surface. In the distance, she could see Earth hanging in space like a blue marble. It looked so peaceful from here, so innocent. Most of the people down there didn't even know what was coming. The door to the command center opened. General Morrison walked in, followed by President Walsh and several other military leaders. They all looked tired. The weight of defending humanity's last hope was showing on their faces. "Status report," President Walsh said without greeting anyone. "Bad and getting worse," Chen replied. "We just lost contact with the Braxton Empire. That leaves 12 free worlds, including us." "Jesus," Morrison muttered. "The Braxtons lasted less than a week?" "The Xerilith don't fight fair," Chen said. "They don't need to. They've got weapons we can't even understand. Ships that can rebuild themselves. Soldiers that adapt to any environment. When they take over a world, they use everything from that world to make themselves stronger." President Walsh sat down heavily in one of the chairs. "What are our options?" "We could surrender," suggested General Parks, the head of Earth's army. "Some worlds that gave up early got to keep their populations alive. The Xerilith turned them into workers, but at least they're not dead." "Or we could fight," Morrison said. "Go out on our own terms." "With what?" Parks shot back. "Our best ships use fusion rockets. The Xerilith have mastered dark matter manipulation. Our strongest weapons are nuclear missiles. They've got things that can tear apart planets." Chen had been listening to this same argument for weeks. She understood both sides. Surrender meant slavery, but at least some humans would survive. Fighting meant death, but they would die free. But there was a third option that nobody else seemed to be considering. "What if we could win?" Chen said quietly. The room fell silent. Everyone stared at her. "Sarah," President Walsh said gently, "I know this is hard to accept, but—" "No, listen to me," Chen interrupted. "Every race in the galaxy has tried to fight the Xerilith using the same basic tactics. Build bigger ships, make stronger weapons, try to match their technology. But what if that's the wrong approach? What do you mean? Morrison asked. Chen walked to the holographic display and pointed at the red areas. Look at this. The Zarelith have conquered thousands of worlds. But how do they do it? They show up with massive fleets and overwhelm the enemy with superior firepower. It works every time because every race in the galaxy fights the same way. Because it's the logical way to fight a space war, Park said. Maybe, Chen replied. But humans have never been very logical when it comes to war. She pulled up a new display showing Earth's military history. We've been fighting impossible wars for thousands of years. Sometimes we lose, but sometimes we find ways to win when everyone says we can't. The display showed images from human conflicts throughout history. Small groups defeating much larger armies. Desperate defenses that turned into victories. People who refused to give up even when the situation looked hopeless. The Spartans at Thermopylae held off a massive Persian army for 3 days. The Americans beat the British Empire using guerrilla tactics. The Finns stopped the Soviet Union in the Winter War. We've always been good at fighting enemies that should be able to crush us. This is different, Parks protested. This is space combat. Technology matters more than courage. Does it? Chen asked. Every report we've gotten says the same thing. The Zarelith are incredibly advanced, but they're also predictable. They use the same tactics every time because those tactics always work. What if we could make them not work? President Walsh leaned forward. What exactly are you suggesting? Give me 3 months, Chen said. Let me study everything we know about how the Zarelith fight. Let me look at our own military history for ideas. Maybe there's something we can do that no other race has thought of. It's a long shot, Morrison said. It's better than surrender. Or suicide, Chen replied. The room was quiet for a long moment. Finally, President Walsh spoke. Do it. You've got 3 months to find us a miracle. Chen nodded. She knew the odds were against them. The Zarelith had never lost a war. They had technology that seemed like magic. Their fleets could probably destroy Earth's entire navy without breaking stride. But humans had one advantage that no other race seemed to have. They were too stupid to know when they were beaten. Over the next few days, Chen assembled a team of historians, tacticians, and engineers. They studied every piece of information about the Zarelith that Earth had managed to gather. They looked at battles from human history, searching for any tactic or strategy that might work in space. The more they learned, the more Chen became convinced that they might actually have a chance. Not a good chance, but a chance. The Zarelith were like a perfect machine. They never made mistakes. They never took unnecessary risks. They followed their battle plans exactly. But humans were the opposite. They made mistakes all the time. They took crazy risks. They changed their plans in the middle of a fight. Maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what the galaxy needed. As the first month passed, long-range sensors began picking up signs of Zarelith movement in nearby star systems. The invasion fleet was coming. Chen stood at the window of Luna Base again, looking out at Earth. In 2 months, alien ships would be in their solar system. Ships that had conquered the entire galaxy. But this time, they would be fighting humans, and humans had never been very good at knowing when to quit. The Zarelith scout ships appeared at the edge of the solar system exactly when Earth's intelligence had predicted. Admiral Kethmore watched the tactical display aboard his flagship, the Dominant Reach, as his advance fleet moved past Neptune. Local species response? He asked his tactical officer. Standard pattern, Admiral. They're deploying their main fleet in defensive positions around the 7th planet, approximately 200 primitive vessels. Kethmore barely glanced at the human ships. After conquering over 3,000 star systems, he had seen this same scenario play out countless times. The local species would make a brave stand with their best technology. They would fight hard for a few hours. Then they would break and either surrender or be destroyed. The humans appeared to be following the exact same script as every other race in the galaxy. "Begin standard engagement protocol," Kethmore ordered. Meanwhile, aboard the human flagship Defiance, Admiral Chen watched her own tactical display. The Zarelith fleet was exactly where her team had predicted it would be. The aliens were moving. In the same formation they had used against the Ythani, the Braxons, and every other race they had conquered. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen," she broadcast on the command frequency. "Remember, we're not trying to win this battle. We're gathering intelligence. Stick to the plan." The human fleet moved forward to meet the Zarelith advance guard. On the surface, it looked like a conventional space battle. Human ships fired their missiles and energy weapons at the alien vessels. The Zarelith returned fire with weapons that turned human destroyers into expanding clouds of debris. But hidden among the human fleet were dozens of small, stealthed sensor drones. While the battle raged around them, these tiny devices recorded everything. Every Zarelith weapon signature, every shield frequency, every tactical maneuver. The battle went exactly as Kethmore expected. The primitive human weapons couldn't penetrate Zarelith shields. The human ships were too slow to avoid the aliens' guided projectiles. Within 3 hours, half the human fleet had been destroyed. "They're breaking formation," the tactical officer reported. "The remaining ships are retreating toward the inner system." "Pursue," Kethmore ordered. "Standard pattern. We'll finish them off near their home world." The Zarelith fleet moved deeper into the solar system, chasing the retreating humans. They passed the asteroid belt without giving it much thought. The tactical scanners showed nothing but rocks and ice. Admiral Chen watched from the bridge of her retreating flagship as the Zarelith fleet took the bait. Hidden among those asteroids were 3 months' worth of preparation. Every mining operation in the belt had been converted to a weapons platform. Thousands of mining charges had been networked together into massive kinetic bombardment systems. "All stations, this is Chen. Execute Operation Sledgehammer." The asteroid belt exploded into motion. What the Zarelith had assumed were lifeless rocks suddenly came alive with weapons fire. Massive chunks of metal and ice, accelerated to incredible speeds by mining charges, slammed into the alien ships. The Zarelith shields held against most of the impacts, but the sheer volume of fire was overwhelming. Several smaller ships took damage. More importantly, the attack forced the aliens to change their neat formations. "Clever," Admiral Kethmore admitted as his ship shook from multiple impacts. "But ultimately pointless." He was right. The kinetic bombardment was impressive, but it wasn't enough to seriously damage his fleet. The Zarelith ships adapted quickly, adjusting their shield frequencies and deploying point defense systems. But Chen hadn't expected the asteroid trap to win the battle. She had expected it to do exactly what it did: force the Zarelith to reveal more of their capabilities. "Phase 2, she ordered. The human fleet suddenly split up. Instead of retreating in formation, the ships scattered in all directions. Some headed for Mars. Others dove toward the sun. A few even accelerated toward the outer system. This wasn't standard military doctrine. No sane commander would split their forces when facing a superior enemy. But the Zarelith tactical computers had trouble predicting what the humans would do next when the humans weren't following logical strategies. "They're acting irrationally," the tactical officer reported to Admiral Kethmore. "Desperation," Kethmore replied. "Maintain pursuit of the largest group. The others will be easy to hunt down later." But the scattered human ships weren't running in panic. They were implementing tactics that Chen's team had developed from studying Earth's military history. Hit-and-run attacks. Guerrilla warfare adapted for space combat. Fighting smart instead of fighting fair. A group of human destroyers used Mars' gravity well to accelerate beyond their normal top speed, then rammed themselves into a Zarelith cruiser. The alien ship's shields stopped the first impact, but the second and third destroyers punched through and caused significant damage. Another group of human ships hid in the shadow of Jupiter's moons, then ambushed a Zarelith patrol with concentrated fire before disappearing back into the gas giant's radiation field. Individual human captains began improvising tactics that the Zarelith computers couldn't predict. Captain Rodriguez of the destroyer Indomitable used his ship's industrial fabricators to create crude kinetic weapons on the fly. Commander Park of the cruiser. Tenacious discovered that overloading her ship's fusion reactor created an electromagnetic pulse that could disrupt Zarelith sensors. For the first time in the war, Zarelith ships were being destroyed by an enemy they were supposed to easily defeat. Admiral Kethmore stared at his tactical display in confusion. The humans were still losing the overall battle, but they were winning individual engagements using tactics that made no logical sense. "Sir," his communications officer said, "we're receiving a transmission from the human homeworld." "Put it through." "Admiral." Chen's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired, but not defeated. "Admiral Kethmore of the Zarelith Hegemony," she said. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. I'm calling to offer the surrender of Earth and all human colonies." Kethmore was relieved. Finally, the humans were acting rationally. "State your terms," he said. "Complete withdrawal of all human military forces. Dismantling of our weapon systems. Integration of our population into the hegemony as worker citizens. In return, you guarantee the survival of our species." "Acceptable. You have 6 hours to begin the process." "Understood." Chen out. The transmission ended. Kethmore ordered his fleet to hold position while the humans carried out their surrender. It was disappointing in a way. The humans had shown more creativity than most races, but in the end, they had given up just like all the others. But Admiral Chen wasn't surrendering. She was buying time. While Kethmore waited for the human surrender, teams of engineers and technicians were working frantically throughout the solar system. The scattered human ships weren't retreating randomly. They were implementing the final phase of Chen's plan. The 3 months of preparation hadn't just been about mining the asteroid belt. Every civilian structure in the solar system had been quietly converted into a potential weapon. Space stations became missile platforms. Cargo haulers became kinetic projectiles. Even the orbital elevators on Earth and Mars had been rigged with explosives that could turn them into massive whips capable of striking targets in orbit. "Time's up," Chen said as the 6-hour deadline approached. "All units, execute final protocol." The solar system erupted in coordinated chaos. Every human, ship, station, and platform that was still functional opened fire at once. But they weren't aiming for the main Zarelith fleet. They were targeting the smaller ships that had spread out to monitor the human surrender. In the span of 10 minutes, the humans destroyed or disabled 30% of the Zarelith advance fleet using tactics that no military computer could have predicted. Admiral Kethmore watched his carefully organized invasion force dissolve into confusion as human attacks came from every direction at once. Cargo ships rammed his destroyers. Civilian space stations launched improvised missiles. Even the humans' orbital debris was apparently weaponized. "Sir," his tactical officer said, "the humans never intended to surrender. This was all a deception." Kethmore studied the tactical display. His fleet was still superior in terms of firepower and technology. But the humans had accomplished something that no other race had managed. They had made the Zarelith look foolish. More importantly, they had proven that the mighty hegemony could be hurt. "Send a message to High Command," Kethmore ordered. "Request immediate reinforcement. Full battle fleet." "Sir, that seems excessive for one primitive world." "These are not primitive beings," Kethmore replied, watching as another of his ships fell to a human attack that should have been impossible. "These are something the galaxy has never seen before." He paused, trying to find the right words to describe what he was witnessing. "They fight like they don't know they're supposed to. Lose." 3 weeks after the first battle, Admiral Kethmore had to admit that fighting humans was unlike anything he had experienced in his long military career. The creatures seemed to have no understanding of proper military doctrine. "Status report," he demanded from his bridge crew. "We've lost another cruiser, sir," the tactical officer replied. A human cargo vessel loaded with industrial explosives collided with the Endless Victory while it was investigating the fourth planet. "How did a cargo ship get past our sensors?" "It was disguised as space debris. The humans seemed to be very good at making their ships look like junk," Kethmore growled in frustration. In 3 weeks of fighting, he had lost more ships than he typically lost in an entire campaign. The humans were still vastly outnumbered and outgunned, but they kept finding ways to make each loss hurt. The problem was that human tactics made no sense. They would sacrifice expensive warships to destroy Zerolith patrol boats. They used civilian vessels as weapons. They turned mining equipment into military hardware. Worst of all, they seemed to fight more cleverly the more desperate their situation became. "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from one of our captured human prisoners. Put it through." The face that appeared on screen belonged to Captain Rodriguez, whose destroyer had been captured 3 days earlier. The human looked tired but not broken. "Admiral Kethmore," Rodriguez said, "I have information that might interest you." "Speak." "My people are planning something big, a major operation that will target your command ship directly. I'm willing to provide details in exchange for better treatment for my crew." Kethmore studied the human's face. The species was known for deception, but this man seemed sincere, and the Zerolith had been wondering when the humans would attempt a direct assault on his flagship. "What kind of operation?" "Tomorrow, during the next shift change. Admiral Chen is going to lead a strike force of 20 ships against the dominant. Reach. She's betting that your defenses will be focused on the outer perimeter." "Why are you telling me this?" Rodriguez looked away. "Because I've seen what your people do to worlds that resist too long. I don't want Earth to end up like the Braxton homeworld." The transmission ended. Kethmore considered the information. It made tactical sense. A desperate strike at the enemy command structure was exactly the kind of reckless move he had come to expect from humans. But something felt wrong about the whole exchange. "Increase security around the flagship," he ordered, "and prepare a trap. If the humans want to commit suicide, we'll accommodate them." What Kethmore didn't know was that Captain Rodriguez had volunteered to be captured. The entire conversation had been planned by Admiral Chen as part of a larger deception. While the Zerolith prepared for a non-existent attack on their flagship, the real human operation was taking place on Mars. Commander Sarah Park crouched in the ruins of New Berlin, one of Mars's largest cities. The Zerolith had bombed it 3 days ago, turning the dome cities into twisted metal and broken glass. But they hadn't bothered to post guards. The aliens assumed that nothing could survive in the wreckage. They were wrong. Park's team of 50 volunteers had been hiding in the ruins for days, waiting for this moment. They were all specialists, engineers, technicians, and soldiers who had trained for exactly this kind of mission. "Target confirmed," Park whispered into her comm unit. "The Zerolith are setting up a resource extraction facility in the central dome." "Understood," came Admiral Chen's voice from orbit. "You are authorized for Operation Mayhem." Park smiled grimly. Operation Mayhem was the kind of plan that only humans would be crazy enough to attempt. The Zerolith extraction facility was heavily guarded and equipped with advanced defensive systems. Any conventional assault would fail. But Park's team wasn't planning a conventional assault. They were planning to turn the entire city into a weapon. Over the past 3 days, Park's engineers had been placing charges throughout New Berlin's infrastructure. Not just explosives, but carefully calculated charges designed to create a chain reaction. When detonated in the right sequence, the charges would cause the city's fusion reactors to overload, the water recycling systems to rupture, and the atmospheric processors to malfunction all at once. The result would be a disaster that looked completely accidental but would destroy the Zerolith facility. "All teams, report status," Park ordered. "Team Alpha ready. Reactor charges are in place. Team Beta. Ready, water system charges confirmed. Team Charlie ready. Atmospheric processors rigged. Park checked her chronometer. In exactly 10 minutes, Admiral Chen would begin her fake attack on the Zarelith flagship. That would draw the aliens' attention away from Mars. 5 minutes to the execution, Park announced. Meanwhile, in orbit around Earth, Admiral Chen was launching the most audacious deception of the war. Her strike force consisted of 20 ships, just as Captain Rodriguez had promised the Zarelith. But only 5 of them contained human crews. The other 15 were empty hulks being controlled remotely. As the human ships approached the Zarelith fleet, Admiral Kethmore smiled with satisfaction. Everything was proceeding exactly as the captured prisoner had described. "Prepare the trap," he ordered. "Let them get close, then destroy them all at once." The human ships moved into the Zarelith formation, apparently unaware that they were flying into a carefully prepared ambush. When they reached the optimal position, Kethmore gave the order to spring the trap. The space around the human ships erupted with weapons fire from hidden Zarelith vessels. The human formation was caught in a crossfire that should have destroyed them instantly. But something unexpected happened. Instead of being destroyed, the human ships exploded with far more force than they should have. The explosions were so powerful that they damaged several Zarelith vessels. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, "those ships were loaded with antimatter charges. They were meant to explode." Kethmore realized he had been tricked. The humans had sacrificed empty ships to damage his fleet. But why go to so much trouble? For such a small gain? The answer came 2 minutes later when the Zarelith resource extraction facility on Mars simply vanished in a massive explosion. "How?" Kethmore demanded. "Unknown, sir. It appears the entire city infrastructure failed simultaneously. But our analysts say the probability of such a complete system failure is essentially 0. "The humans did this," Kethmore said with certainty. "While we were distracted by their fake attack, they destroyed our facility." He was beginning to understand how the human mind worked. They didn't just think tactically or strategically. They thought in layers. Every move they made was designed to accomplish multiple objectives. The fake attack hadn't just been a diversion. It had also weakened his fleet, demonstrated that humans could penetrate Zarelith defenses, and provided cover for their real operation on Mars. But the Mars operation hadn't just destroyed a resource facility. It had also sent a message to every world in the galaxy. The mighty Zarelith hegemony could be outmaneuvered by clever enemies. "Sir," the communications officer said, "we're receiving reports from other fronts. Several conquered worlds are experiencing problems." "What kind of problems?" "Sabotage, mostly. Small acts of resistance. Nothing serious yet. But it's spreading." Kethmore felt a chill run through him. For the first time in hegemony history, conquered worlds were fighting back. The humans had done more than just resist invasion. They had proven that resistance was possible. On Mars, Commander Park watched the Zarelith extraction facility burn from her hiding place in the ruins. The explosion had been even more spectacular than her engineers had predicted. More importantly, the mission had succeeded without losing a single human life. "Base, this is Park. Mission accomplished. Requesting extraction." "Negative," came Admiral Chen's voice. "We need you to stay put for Phase 2. "There's a Phase 2? There's always a Phase 2. The Zarelith will send investigators to figure out what happened. We need you to show them." Park frowned. "Show them what?" "That humans don't just break things. We learn from them, too." Over the next few days, Zarelith investigation teams swarmed over the ruins of New Berlin. They found evidence of the sabotage, but they also found something else: hidden human observation posts that had been recording their activities. The humans had been studying Zarelith technology, tactics, and procedures. Every time the aliens investigated a human attack, they unknowingly provided the humans with more intelligence about their own capabilities. Admiral Kethmore reviewed the investigation reports with growing concern. The humans weren't just fighting a guerrilla war, they were conducting an intelligence operation that spanned the entire solar system. "Sir," his aide said quietly, "High Command is requesting a status update." Kethmore hesitated. How could he explain that a primitive species was systematically dismantling his invasion force using tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare? "Tell them we need reinforcements," he said finally. "A lot of reinforcements." "How many, sir?" Kethmore looked at the tactical display showing the human solar system. Red dots marked his remaining ships. Blue dots showed suspected human positions. There were far more blue dots than red ones. "All of them," he said. "Send everything we have." Dr. Elena Vasquez stared at the alien technology spread across her laboratory table. 3 weeks ago, she had been a civilian engineer working on Mars' atmospheric processors. Now she was humanity's leading expert on Xerilith technology, trying to understand machines that were thousands of years more advanced than anything humans had ever built. "Any progress?" Admiral Chen asked as she entered the lab. "Some," Vasquez replied, not looking up from her work. "The good news is that Xerilith technology isn't magic. It follows physical laws, just very advanced ones. The bad news is that it's going to take us decades to understand how it actually works." "We don't have decades. The main Xerilith fleet will be here in 6 weeks. Vasquez finally looked up. "Then we need to stop trying to understand it and start figuring out how to use it." The captured Xerilith equipment had come from the wreckage of ships destroyed in the early battles. Most of it was damaged, but human engineers had managed to salvage some intact systems. Power cores that generated massive amounts of energy, weapons that could punch through any known material, shields that could deflect nuclear explosions. The problem was that none of it was compatible with human technology. It was like trying to plug a fusion reactor into a Stone Age axe. "Show me what you've got," Chen said. Vasquez led her to a workbench where a team of engineers was working on a strange crystalline device. "This is a Xerilith shield generator. We can't figure out how to control it properly, but we can make it work." She activated the device. A shimmering field of energy appeared around it, then flickered and died. "It only works for about 30 seconds before overloading," Vasquez explained. "But 30 seconds of Xerilith-level shielding might be enough to get our ships close to their fleet." Chen nodded. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. "What else?" "We've had some luck with their weapon systems. We can't build new ones, but we can jury-rig the captured units onto our ships. The problem is power. Xerilith weapons need about 10 times more energy than our reactors can provide. So we build bigger reactors. We tried that. The feedback from the alien weapons overloads our power systems. We lost 3 ships in testing accidents." Chen frowned. Human lives were becoming the most precious resource in the war. Every loss hurt not just tactically but personally. She knew the names of most of the people who had died. "There might be another way," Vasquez continued. "What if we don't try to power the weapons continuously? What if we build ships that can fire once, very powerfully, then have to recharge? Suicide ships? Not necessarily. Think of them as one-shot weapons platforms. They get close, fire everything they have, then retreat to recharge." It was a typically human solution. If you can't match the enemy's technology, change the rules of engagement. While Vasquez and her team worked on reverse engineering alien technology, other groups were implementing more desperate measures. Entire colonies had volunteered for evacuation so their habitats could be converted into weapons platforms. The asteroid miners had turned every piece of space rock into a potential kinetic projectile. But the most significant development was happening in secret facilities scattered throughout the solar system. Admiral Chen had authorized something called Project Prometheus, the systematic conversion of human military doctrine to account for fighting an enemy with overwhelming technological superiority. Captain James Wright had been chosen to lead one. of the most dangerous Prometheus units. His team of volunteers was training for something that had never been attempted in the history of space warfare: boarding actions against Zerolith ships. "Remember," Wright told his team as they practiced in a mock-up of a Zerolith corridor, "we're not trying to capture their ships. We're trying to cause as much damage as possible before they stop us." The plan was insane by any reasonable standard. Human soldiers would use modified mining pods to attach themselves to the hulls of Zerolith vessels, then cut their way inside using industrial tools. Once aboard, they would plant explosives throughout the ship's critical systems. The survival rate for such missions was estimated at less than 5%. "Sir," one of Wright's soldiers asked, "what happens if we actually succeed in taking control of a Zerolith ship?" "Then we crash it into another Zerolith ship," Wright replied matter-of-factly. The psychological pressure of preparing for certain death was taking its toll on everyone involved in the war effort. Suicide rates had spiked across human space. Mental health facilities were overwhelmed. But somehow, the majority of the population continued to function. Dr. Sarah Kim, a psychologist working with the military, had been studying this phenomenon. What she found surprised her. "Admiral," she reported to Chen during one of their regular briefings, "our people are responding to the stress of impending extinction in ways I've never seen before." "How so?" "Normally, when faced with certain death, people either break down or go into denial. But humans seem to be doing something else entirely. They're getting more creative." Kim showed Chen her data. Across human space, people were inventing new technologies, developing innovative tactics, and solving problems with unprecedented speed. It was as if the threat of extinction was unlocking human potential. "We're seeing engineers coming up with solutions in days that should take months. Soldiers developing tactics that military academies would spend years analyzing. Civilians volunteering for missions that any sane person would refuse. Are you saying that desperation is making us smarter? I'm saying that humans might be the only species in the galaxy that gets more capable when faced with impossible odds." This theory was about to be tested. Long-range sensors had detected the arrival of the main Zerolith fleet at the edge of the solar system. Admiral Kethmore had called in reinforcements from across the galaxy. Over 3,000 ships were now moving toward Earth. But they weren't alone. "Admiral," Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, his voice tight with excitement, "we're receiving transmissions from the outer system. Multiple contacts, unknown configuration." Chen felt her heart rate increase. "Zerolith reinforcements?" "No, ma'am. The transponder codes are... They're from the Ithani Crystal Fleet, and Corvin stealth ships, and what looks like Braxan battle cruisers." Chen stared at the display in disbelief. These were ships from civilizations that had supposedly been conquered by the Zerolith, but somehow, some of them had escaped. The communication system crackled to life. A musical voice spoke in the crystal tones of the Ithani. "This is crystal singer Melithara of the Ithani Resistance Fleet. We offer our assistance to the humans of Earth." More voices followed. A mechanical Corvin consciousness, a growling Braxan warrior, survivors from a dozen different species that had supposedly been wiped out by the Zerolith. "How?" Chen asked when the communications ended. "Word of what we're doing here has spread," Rodriguez explained. "Apparently, some members of each conquered species managed to escape. They've been hiding in deep space, waiting for a chance to fight back. And we gave them that chance. More than that, ma'am. We've shown them that the Zerolith can be beaten. Now they want to help us prove it." The combined fleet that gathered in the outer reaches of the solar system was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ithani crystal ships that could phase through solid matter. Corvin vessels that could become invisible to all sensors. Braxan warships designed for pure destruction. And holding them all together, human crews who had learned to think like guerrilla fighters. But Admiral Chen knew that even with these reinforcements, they were still vastly outnumbered. The Zarelith fleet approaching them represented a significant portion of the galaxy's most powerful military force. "Ma'am," Dr. Vasquez called, from her workstation. "I think I've figured out how to give us an edge." "Tell me." "The Zarelith ships all use the same command frequency to coordinate their attacks. If we could hack into that frequency, we could turn their coordination against them." "Exactly. But it would require getting very close to their command ship. Close enough to plant a virus in their communication system." Chen looked at the tactical display. The Zarelith command ship was at the center of a formation of over 1,000 vessels. Getting close to it would require fighting through the entire enemy fleet. "How close?" "Physical contact," Vasquez said quietly. Chen nodded slowly. It was another suicide mission. But if it worked, it might give them the chance they needed. "Start preparing the virus," she ordered. "I'll find us a crew willing to deliver it." As word of the plan spread through the human fleet, Chen was amazed by the response. Dozens of crews volunteered for what was essentially a one-way mission. They all understood the odds. They all knew they probably wouldn't survive. But they also knew that their sacrifice might give their species a chance to win a war that everyone said was impossible. Captain Wright approached Chen as she reviewed the volunteer list. "Admiral, I'd like to request that my boarding team be assigned to the delivery mission." "Captain, your team is already volunteering for suicide missions. I can't ask you to take on another one." Wright smiled grimly. "Ma'am, with respect, you're not asking. We're offering. My people have been training to board Zarelith ships. This mission just gives us a bigger target." Chen looked at the list of volunteers. Every name on it belonged to someone she knew personally. People who had families, dreams, futures that they were willing to sacrifice for the final battle for the solar system began at dawn on Earth, though in space there was no real dawn or dusk. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the rebuilt Defiance, watching as the largest space fleet in galactic history prepared for combat. 3,000 Zarelith ships formed a wall of destruction stretching across space. Their dark hulls gleamed with weapons that could crack planets. Behind them came support vessels carrying the infrastructure to convert Earth into another Zarelith resource world. Facing them was the most unlikely alliance the galaxy had ever seen. 400 human ships, most of them converted civilian vessels. 200 Athani crystal ships that sparkled like living jewels. 150 Corvin stealth vessels that flickered in and out of visibility. 300 Braxton warships painted with the skulls of their enemies. It should have been a massacre. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen," she broadcast on the Alliance frequency. "Remember what we're fighting for. This isn't just about Earth anymore. Every free world in the galaxy is watching us today." Admiral Kethmore observed the enemy formation from his flagship with professional interest. The mixed fleet looked formidable, but he had faced similar coalitions before. Different species had different fighting styles, different technologies, different weaknesses. The key was to divide them and destroy them separately. "Begin standard engagement pattern," he ordered. "Target the largest enemy vessels first." But as the Zarelith fleet moved forward, something unexpected happened. Instead of maintaining separate formations based on species, the Alliance fleet began to merge into mixed units. Human ships paired with Ethani crystals, Corvin stealth vessels coordinated with Braxton destroyers. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, "the enemy fleet is using integrated tactics. I've never seen anything like it." Kethmore frowned. Every species in the galaxy fought according to their own traditions and capabilities. But somehow, the humans had convinced their allies to abandon centuries of military doctrine and fight as a unified force. The first engagement revealed the genius of the human strategy. A group of Athani ships phased through Zarelith shields, while human vessels provided covering fire. The Athani couldn't hurt the enemy ships while phased, but they could observe their internal structure and relay targeting information to the humans. Meanwhile, Corvin stealth ships became invisible. and planted human-designed explosives on Zarelith hulls. When the devices detonated, Braxan warships charged through the breaches with their trademark berserker fury. Each species was doing what they did best, but in coordination with others who complemented their abilities. "Impossible," Kethmore muttered, as he watched another of his cruisers fall to the Alliance tactics. "How are they coordinating so effectively?" The answer was visible on every Alliance ship. Human crew members served as tactical coordinators, using their species' gift for improvisation to adapt strategies in real time. When a plan stopped working, the humans simply changed it. When an opportunity appeared, they seized it instantly. Captain Rodriguez, now commanding a mixed human-Athani squadron, demonstrated this flexibility when his formation encountered a Zarelith battleship that should have destroyed them all. "Crystal Singer Melithara," he said to his Athani partner, "can your ship phase through their hull?" "Yes, but we cannot harm them while phased." "You don't need to harm them. Just get me inside their shield perimeter." The Athani ship phased through the enemy vessel, carrying Rodriguez's destroyer along in its wake. Once inside the Zarelith shields, the human ship opened fire at point-blank range while the Athani ship solidified and began tearing at the enemy hull with crystalline projections. The Zarelith battleship, designed to fight enemies at long range, couldn't respond to an attack from inside its own defenses. Similar innovations were happening throughout the battle. Braxan warriors, normally too aggressive for their own good, learned to use human timing to coordinate their attacks. Corvin stealth ships, usually loners, began working in packs guided by human tactical thinking. But the most significant development was happening at the strategic level. The Zarelith fleet was larger and more powerful, but the Alliance fleet was learning faster. "Sir," Admiral Kethmore's aide reported, "we're losing ships at 3 times the expected rate. How is that possible?" "The enemy keeps changing their tactics. Every time we adapt to their strategy, they switch to something else." Kethmore realized that he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic military history. The Alliance wasn't just fighting the Zarelith. They were evolving their tactics during the battle itself. The humans had somehow taught other species how to be human. Deep in the chaos of the space battle, Captain Wright and his boarding team were executing the most dangerous mission of the war. Their target was the Zarelith command ship, a massive vessel that coordinated the entire enemy fleet. Wright's team flew their modified mining pods through the battle zone, dodging weapons fire and debris as they approached the enemy flagship. Half of his men were killed before they even reached their target. "Remember the plan," Wright told the survivors as they attached their pods to the Zarelith hull. "We only need to hold the ship for 5 minutes. Long enough for Dr. Vasquez to upload her virus." The human soldiers cut through the alien hull using industrial plasma torches. The Zarelith ship's automatic defenses tried to stop them, but Wright's team had trained for this. They moved through the corridors like they had memorized every turn, which they had. The captured Zarelith technology had included detailed schematics of their ship designs. Wright's team knew exactly where to go and what to destroy. "Corridor secured," Sergeant Martinez reported, as her squad eliminated a group of Zarelith defenders. "Computer core located," added Corporal Kim, as he planted explosives around the ship's main data systems. Wright reached the command center just as the ship's captain realized what was happening. The alien was larger than any human, with natural armor and built-in weapons. But Wright had something the Zarelith didn't expect: complete willingness to die for his mission. The human soldier tackled the alien captain, not trying to defeat him, but simply to keep him busy while Dr. Vasquez, monitoring from a safe distance, uploaded her virus into the ship's communication systems. "Upload complete," Vasquez reported. "Get out of there." But Wright's team had always known this was a one-way mission. The Zarelith ship was already flooding with security forces. Instead of trying to escape, Wright's surviving soldiers began detonating their explosives. The command ship didn't explode. It did something worse from the Zarelith perspective. It began broadcasting corrupted orders to the entire fleet. Admiral Kethmore watched in horror as his carefully coordinated fleet began to fall apart. Ships that should have been supporting each other started firing at random targets. Formation patterns dissolved into chaos. The virus wasn't just jamming their communications. It was turning their own coordination systems against them. "Sir, we're receiving reports from across the fleet. All ships are experiencing command failures." "Switch to manual control," Kethmore ordered. "We're trying, sir, but the virus is embedded in our base communication protocols. We can't coordinate attacks without using the infected systems." For the first time in Zarelith history, their greatest strength had become their greatest weakness. The efficiency and coordination that had allowed them to conquer the galaxy was now working against them. The Alliance fleet, coordinated by human adaptability rather than rigid protocols, pressed their advantage. Athani ships phased through. The confused Zarelith formations, Corvin vessels struck from stealth. Braxan warriors charged into the chaos with wild enthusiasm, and human ships did what they did best: they improvised. Admiral Chen watched the battle turn from her flagship, but her attention was focused on something else entirely. While the space battle raged, she was broadcasting everything they had learned to every world in the galaxy. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force," she said into the communication array. "I'm transmitting tactical data, technical specifications, and strategic doctrines to all free worlds. The Zarelith can be defeated. Here's how." The broadcast went out on every frequency, to every planet, using communication networks that the Zarelith themselves had built. Within hours, every conquered world in the galaxy would have access to human military innovations. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Rodriguez asked, "what if we lose this battle? We're giving away all our advantages." "If we lose," Chen replied, "our advantages won't matter anyway. But if we win, everyone in the galaxy will know that the Zarelith aren't invincible." The battle continued for 18 hours. When it finally ended, over half the Zarelith fleet had been destroyed or disabled. The remainder retreated to regroup, but their aura of invincibility was shattered forever. More importantly, the galaxy had witnessed something unprecedented. The mighty Zarelith hegemony had been defeated by a coalition of supposedly inferior species. 5 years later, Admiral Chen stood in her office on Luna Base, now the headquarters of the Free Worlds Coalition. Through her window, she could see ships from dozens of different species coming and going. Trade vessels, exploration ships, and yes, military craft preparing for the next phase of the war against the hegemony. "Status report," she asked her aide, now Colonel Rodriguez.